Just after 2 p.m. Central Time, which means it's my privilege to welcome you to today's Alumni Career Webinar, Preparing for the Postgraduate Job Market, presented by Dr. Sian Beilock. My name is Maggie Elmarakbi, and I'm the Assistant Director for Career Programs here at the Alumni Association. Our office is committed to helping provide alumni with the resources they need to stay competitive in an ever-changing job market and support the alumni community with career resources, networking channels, and job search capabilities. It's my privilege to introduce you to our presenter today, Dr. Sian Beilock. Dr. Beilock is the Stella M. Rowley Professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Chicago and the Vice-Provost for Academic Initiatives. She is one of the world's leading experts on the brain science behind choking under pressure and the many brain and body factors influencing all types of performance, from test-taking to public speaking to your golf swing. Dr. Beilock's research is funded by the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Education. Her critically acclaimed book, Choke, What the Secrets of the Brain Reveals About Getting It Right When You Have to, came out in fall 2010. Dr. Beilock also leads UChicagoGRAD, an office and comprehensive program designed to make resources for graduate students and postdocs accessible and effective. In partnership with academic departments, divisions, and schools, UChicagoGRAD is committed to helping graduate students and postdocs navigate their academic and professional careers. Today's webinar will focus on the job market for master's students and PhD alumni in industry, government, and the nonprofit sector. Now let's get to the reason that you've all joined today, and let me welcome Dr. Beilock.
Well, thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about UChicagoGRAD, which, as you just heard, is a new office and initiative as of last spring, really designed to help support masters, PhDs, and postdocs in their time on campus and into their careers as leaders in academia, government, nonprofit, and industry. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what UChicagoGRAD is, why we're here, and what we're doing to support students as they navigate their careers. I'm then going to share some insights into what we've learned about successful candidates from advanced degree programs. And I'll also present some case studies to illustrate some common themes of successful alumni and students in terms of careers in government, nonprofit, and industry. And as you heard, I'm also a faculty member, and no faculty member can resist talking about their research when they give a presentation. And fortunately, my research actually bears on interviewing and being under the gun in stressful situations. So I'll also tell you a little bit about what we're learning from the latest work in brain science about how to perform at your best, especially under stress. So I'll start by talking a little bit about what UChicagoGRAD is and where it fits in to the broader landscape at the university. So UChicagoGRAD started last spring in earnest, and really it was a reorganization of resources on campus in response to questions and from the divisions and the schools asking us really how we could better support graduate students thinking about diverse careers. So not just in the academy, but in government, nonprofit, and industry. And we realized that having a central office that could really focus solely on graduate students and postdocs and help think about how they could use their advanced skills in the marketplace would be something that would be very beneficial. So UChicagoGRAD, really what we talk about, our mission is complementing the training students get in the divisions and schools and helping graduate students and postdocs essentially not only use that training while they're here, but use it to navigate their careers as they think about becoming leaders in a variety of fields. Just to give you an idea of the landscape of graduate students at the University of Chicago, we have a lot of them. So on this next slide, I actually show you the number of graduate students across the divisions and schools split up by master's and doctoral students. We have almost 9,000 graduate students, about 600 postdocs. And this is in contrast to the college, which right now I believe is about 5,500. So you can see that we have a lot of graduate students on campus in varied disciplines. And one question that we have been asking as a new office and initiative is how we can help get the best students to campus, so support students in getting here, and then how we can help students with the skills and experiences they might need to effectively communicate and advocate for their knowledge and training in industry, government, and nonprofit, as well as academia. So UChicagoGRAD is actually organized around 4 main themes or pillars. We support the divisions and schools in recruiting the best students to campus. So this can be everything from outreach events to making sure that our departments, divisions, and schools are reaching a diverse student body. Once students are on campus, we think very specifically about how we can develop their skills and experiences. So this ranges from everything from written communication to oral communication to fellowship support to English as a second language to interviewing skills, anything a student might need, both to think about how they can succeed in the classroom and in their research, but also as they go outside, possibly leaving the academy into government, nonprofit, and industry. And one thing that we're really trying to do on campus is change what I think has often been talked about as this false dichotomy, this idea that you need one set of skills if you're going to go be an academic and another set of skills if you're going to go into government, nonprofit, and industry. From our standpoint, it turns out that a lot of those skills are actually the same. You have to be able to talk clearly to people who are not necessarily in your discipline. You have to advocate for the training and skills you've gotten. Maybe it has something specifically to do with the knowledge you've gained in your discipline, or it could be your ability to think critically, work effectively with others, write clearly. These are all things that students need. And finally, you have to convince others why what you're doing is important. And so what we've been advocating both with students, with faculty, with employers that we work with is that the students that are coming out of UChicago and the masters and the PhD, our postdocs, have a set of skills that can be widely used. And when we're thinking about placing students, these skills and these successes can find homes in a number of places. We also work very closely on career development, so we help students place in academic positions through our Chicago Center for Teaching, through supporting them through the academic job market process. We also work specifically on placing students and giving them the experiences and knowledge necessary to go into government, nonprofit, and industry. So we actually have career points across our divisions in schools. We have 6 career points who work specifically and only with graduate students and postdocs, really designed to help them figure out what they're interested in, what their skill set enables them to do, and make connections that will allow them to be successful leaders in many different careers. And we really believe that when a graduate student leaves the university, not only are they upholding the tradition and scholarship in which they've been trained in, but they're actually a conveyor of knowledge. It's one of the best ways to convey knowledge from the academy to the marketplace is send knowledgeable people out into it. And so we've been working very closely with students across all divisions and schools on campus to make sure they're best prepared to go out into many different career opportunities. And I'll talk more about those specifically in a second. Finally, we're very interested in working with alumni, both locally, nationally, and globally. We feel that alumni, in some ways, at the master's, PhD, and even postdoc level are an untapped resource, especially those who go outside the academy into government, nonprofit, and industry, as the skills, experiences, and essentially the roadmaps that they've carved for themselves are so valuable to students who are here. So we work very diligently to connect graduate students with alumni that might be relevant to them. We work with departments, we work with divisions, we work in our global centers, and our goal really is to use alumni as a knowledgeable resource that they are, and also give back to alumni in terms of the programs and experiences that we're developing. So why now? Why UChicago Grad now? Well, one thing is that we're really responding to a changing job market, especially for PhD students. While it was once the case that getting a PhD meant a straight road into the academy, we now know that PhDs are valuable in many different fields. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times today talking about the value of PhD on Wall Street, which I immediately forwarded to everyone in UChicago Grad. And one of the staff emailed me back and said, we were betting about how early in the morning it would take you to forward this. So he lost the bet because it wasn't until 11. But the idea that PhDs are necessary everywhere and that they are a conveyor of information, and that this is true for master's students too, has really changed in recent years. We know from looking at our own programs, between a quarter and a third of our PhDs immediately leave academia once they finish their degree and more likely go into industry and government and nonprofit later on. And our goal really is at all stages, from master's to PhD to postdoc, to help give students the skills to effectively transmit the knowledge and the experiences that they've had at the University of Chicago into leadership positions in the careers they choose. The second reason is that, again, as I talked about previously, graduate students need lots of different training. Not only do they need to be trained in their specific field, whether it's classics or astrophysics, but they have to be trained to be able to communicate that knowledge to other individuals, whether it's other physicists or a broader community. This is something that is being asked of from academic work in general, and this is important for both interviewing if you're giving an academic job talk and also interviewing for a job anywhere else. When my PhD students go to interview for academic jobs, what I tell them is that the first goal is to convince the person farthest afield from you in a department that they should hire you, which means you have to talk about jargon, you have to get them to understand why what you do will be valuable to them. It turns out that that's not so different from interviewing for any sort of job. I was sitting next to a consultant from a recruiter from a large consulting company at a job fair we had recently, and I asked her what is the first thing she does when she brings a PhD student in to interview for a position. And she said the first thing she does is ask them to talk for 5 minutes about their research. If she can't understand them in a clear and concise manner, if she's not excited by what they're doing, the interview is over. Now, it may not be that the student will be using their specific knowledge they gained in their PhD in their career, although it could be, but being able to talk about what you do in a flexible way is a hallmark for these recruiters. And this is true both for graduate students going into academia and also for graduate students thinking about government, nonprofit, or industry. And so we've been really emphasizing this need to think about the types of critical thinking skills, analytic skills, inductive skills, the ability to convey complex ideas that are needed whether or not you are going to be a professor or a consultant or a research scientist. And again, we really have been pushing this idea that there has been this false dichotomy out there that you need one set of skills if you're thinking about a university setting and another set of skills outside. It's just not true. And so our goal is to train graduate students, master's students, PhDs, and postdocs with skills that complement the discipline-specific work they're getting in their departments, divisions, and schools, so that when they leave, they have the tools and the options to go into whatever career they pursue. So what sorts of services do we provide at UChicagoGRAD? There's a lot of them, and we're really excited to partner with lots of entities on campus to ensure that students are getting the skills and training they need to go out into different types of careers. So the Chicago Center for Teaching, which helps students build pedagogy skills, which can be important in the classroom, but also if you're training a team. We also do fellowship advising. We do written and oral communication support. We run the Council of Advanced Studies, which provides graduate students in the humanities, social sciences, divinity school with opportunities to organize seminars, to bring in speakers, to really test their ability to converse on a national level. We also have a Family Resource Center, which provides support and opportunities for students on campus. There's a drop-in space where you can come sometimes and leave your child with a babysitter on the premises and go into another room and write. And we also run the English Language Institute, which is part of the Chicago Language Center. And that essentially allows students whose English is not their first language, it gives them the skills and techniques they need to succeed when they're on campus in their careers. So we run a lot of different entities on campus, and again, all of these entities are designed to help support students, help to augment the skills they're getting in their specific discipline so that when they go out into their careers, they are able to be leaders. One of the things that we really focus on is this ability to communicate information effectively, and this is something that's close to my heart. One of the things that I've studied in my research, I study basically, in most general terms, why people choke under pressure or why people sometimes fail to perform up to their potential when it matters most. And choking is something that often happens in situations where you have to speak publicly, and this is something we work on at an advanced level with our master's, PhD students, and postdocs. And it turns out just knowing information is not the same thing as being able to effectively communicate it. And I think we probably all know that from having a great professor once who couldn't tell us anything that we could understand. Of course, this never happened with me, but other people, other professors. And public speaking and interviewing is one of the things that we focus on specifically in UChicagoGRAD, whether it's raising your hand in a class, whether it's TAing or teaching to students, whether it's writing a blog or giving a talk to a general audience or interviewing for a job. We're really interested in making sure that students have the ability to effectively advocate and communicate their skills. So it turns out that Americans fear public speaking. In fact, if you do a survey, they fear it oftentimes next to death. Spiders are up there too, but public speaking, it freaks people out. So the question is, what can we do to help people perform at the best? You have the knowledge, you have the skills, you get up there and then you just freeze. Or you're in an interview situation, or you have 1 minute in an elevator to convince someone that you're not a complete and total, for lack of a better word, airhead, and you just aren't able to get the words out. So from my work as a neuroscientist, we've learned actually a lot about what happens in the brain in these stressful situations, and by knowing that, we can actually start to develop techniques and skills to help people perform better. So one thing that happens when we're in these stressful situations is that the front part of our brain, our frontal cortex, which helps us focus our attention, it helps us juggle numbers in our head, say eloquent things, get a tiny little ball to go into a tiny little hole, it goes awry. And this is because actually emotionally ancient areas of the brain are rearing their head. They're taking over. So what can we do to tamp down or calm down those emotionally anxious areas of the head? One thing that we've shown is actually just getting people to write down their worries before they go into a high-stakes situation does a lot to free up our focus of attention. It's kind of like downloading something from a computer. It frees up that limited capacity to focus on what you want. Just jotting down your worries before you go into an interview, before you give a big talk or presentation, download them from mind so they're less likely to pop up and distract you in the moment. That's an easy one. It's also the case that actually when you're up there giving a talk, or even when you're interviewing, when you're trying to get information across to someone else, it's really important to get the take-home point out first. I think we've all gotten emails where it's like 4 pages of email, and then we're like, what does this person want? It turns out there's psychological theory behind this that getting the take-home point out first actually creates an empty file drawer, if you will, in your head. It allows you to funnel all the other information into it. If you don't get the take-home point out to the end, that open file is never created. You're having to piece together all the information, and it just doesn't make sense. So just because I'm an experimentalist, I'm going to give you an example of this. So go ahead and read the following passage. So I'm assuming people are confused. When I give this in front of a live audience, people are looking at me cross-eyed like I've gone a little crazy. And it turns out there's research done with this passage. So if you have people read this passage and ask them later to remember what it was about, it's very hard to do. In fact, people can't understand what it's about. But if you tell them ahead of time that you're going to read a passage about washing clothes, now all of a sudden the passage makes sense. And the idea here is that when you give the take-home point first, you have this schema or this hook with which to put everything else on, and you remember many more details of it. We tend to want to give the take-home point last in an email or when we're talking to someone else, but when you go into an interview or when you're trying to get information across, that take-home point first essentially aids them in being able to cognitively remember the information. So getting your worries down on paper, making sure you're getting the take-home point out first, and another point that's really important is to practice, practice, practice. Now, if you're going to give a talk or you're going to interview, I'm not just talking about practicing by yourself or reading something on a piece of paper. I'm talking about practicing in the kinds of stressful situations you're going to experience. What that does is get your brain and body used to that sweaty palms, the beating heart, having to find your words, and it gets you inoculated, ready for that big day. It's practicing with other people. If you can't find anyone else, videotape yourself, do it in front of the mirror. Social psychologists have known for years that putting a mirror in front of yourself makes you more self-conscious. Do anything to mimic the kinds of situations you're going to experience. And this is something that we do at UChicagoGRAD. Oftentimes, first-round interviews take place on Skype, and we will put one person in one room on a computer and another person on another room and have them go through the interview process. It's a really great way to get experience so that when you get into that high-stakes situation, you're ready to go. We also embody this practice idea in a number of different ways. We have a series as part of UChicagoGRAD called Grad Talk, where students actually get experience giving talks to general audiences. We have a year-long series called Expose Yourself. I love this. Students like it too. Where students, we do lab calls where, say, half a dozen students in the sciences will give talks to 50 to 100 graduate students from English to art history to psychology about the work they do, and they have to do it in a way that gets rid of the jargon, which means they really have to understand it. We did one at the Art Institute in November where we bussed downtown upwards of 100 students, and humanists got up next to works of art and gave talks about their research related to these works of art. All of these practice opportunities give students and postdocs to experience in front of people when your heart races a little, your palms get a little bit sweaty, to actually talk about what they do in terms that everyone can understand. We also, as part of our UChicagoGRAD work, do career advising. So I talked a little bit about some of the student skills and experience with these writing, oral communication. We also do career advising where you can set up an appointment one-on-one with a career advisor to talk about potential jobs in government, nonprofit, and industry. They'll give you tips. They'll talk to you about how people you might want to connect with, alumni, students who've had similar experiences like that you have. And in addition to this career advising, we run lots of different programs all year on campus to really help students think about options across a number of different fields. And I will say that I think students are speaking with their feet. Just since the start of this academic year, we've had 1,300 students come through one-on-one. So these are lots of students coming through the door, and several thousand actually have been to our programs. So some of the examples of the career programming we offer, we run a conference called Grad UConn in the spring that essentially gives students the ability to talk to alumni, to talk to faculty, to talk to people who've had similar career paths that they're interested in. So on the screen that you're looking at now, on the left-hand side is Thomas Kim. He's an English PhD, and he's at Mansur Capital, and he's talking to a student who's interested in the financial sector. On the bottom, we have Leah Tompert, who did her work in the Committee on International Relations. She's currently works at the UN Women, where she champions gender equality internationally. And on the top right, we have history faculty member Emily Osborne, who moderates a panel that we call Year One as Faculty, which she discussed with 4 UChicago alumni the ins and outs of being a first-year faculty member. I tell my students that if they're not in the fetal position every night and they've learned how to make a coffee, they're a success, but there's other things that you can learn how to do in your first year. So the point is that we do programming where we try and connect students with people who've had experiences like them and connect them with individuals, alumni, faculty, other people on campus who can really give them experiences. Of course, faculty members have traditionally experienced in one area, being in the academy, so this is where we really see UChicagoGRAD coming in, because we have the ability to connect students with a broader network, both in terms of developing employer relations, but also developing alumni networks that span across one division in school, span across the entire university. Oftentimes, we've received feedback, and the data support this as well, is that students don't necessarily go into careers that are directly aligned with their education and experiences. And so being able to connect a student from Harris with an alumni from, say, the medical school or from law school or social sciences helps students explore diverse career options. And we do this as well with the work of an employer relations specialist who basically, her job is to identify beneficial relationships for students, and invite employers to campus for on-campus interviews, information sessions, really dedicated to graduate students. And so on the left, you can see here in this slide, we have Stephen Wan from Boston Consulting Group, who's very much interested in graduate students. And we know that there are several of our PhDs, actually a PhD in life sciences, who've gone on to work in the Chicago office. And on the right, we have a consulting boot camp where students actually get to understand what consulting is and whether or not they might be interested in it. In 2015, we had our second annual consulting boot camp, which attracted 100 graduate students from across programs, divisions, and schools. And we brought recruiters, representatives, and alumni from 10 consulting firms to campus to talk about what a career in consulting might entail. So again, our goal is to support what's happening in terms of students' training and education by providing them with information, insights, and actually experiences so they can use their knowledge to go out in many different ways. One way we're providing students with experiences is a pilot program we ran last summer, which actually gives students externship and internship experiences, often paid, in careers that and entities that may be something they are interested in exploring after they graduate, or may just simply help them with the research and scholarship they're doing while they're on campus. So last summer we piloted a program called Rad Global Impact. It's an internship program. If you're familiar with the METCAF program at the undergrad level, this is in some ways the grad version of the METCAF. But what this is designed to do is give students experience that will both advance their scholarship and also advance their ability to think about multiple career paths. In our pilot year last year, we had over 70 placements in internship and externships, and we had much more demand than we had opportunities. We're working to get 100 placements this year, and the employers are excited, the students are excited, and again, this goes back to this idea that the work that you do in the field can actually be beneficial, not just for thinking about careers in industry, government, or nonprofits, but also can enhance your scholarship. So on the right side of the screen here, I just have some examples of the placements we did last year. On the left side, I have a couple examples of specific students. On the top is Drew Kerr. He was doing his master's in divinity. He actually studies conflict resolution and peace studies, and he worked with a development project in northeast India. And the goal was that his work would contribute to thinking about potentially his master's thesis. On the bottom, we have a BSc student in ecology and evolution who was collecting data in Peru, again with the idea being that she was learning techniques that could potentially contribute to her dissertation, to the work that she's doing. When students write applications for these internship experiences, we ask them to articulate how the work they're doing will advance their scholarship, as well as give them experiences that can allow them to see what types of careers are out there. I also wanted to mention that in addition to these Grad Global Impact internships, we have a program called Higher Education Interns, and it's run through the university's UChicago Grad program in partnership with many different offices on campus, and it provides graduate students professional experience and exposure to higher education administration campus-wide. Beginning in fall 2016, so this coming fall, our higher education cohort will actually participate in a certificate granting curriculum designed to hone their professional and personal skills and prepare them for diverse careers, whether it's in academia, government, nonprofit, and industry. So how does all this work? I've told you a little bit about the formation of UChicagoGRAD, where we see ourselves sitting on campus. Now I wanted to give you actually some examples of students and postdocs who've gone through our programs and ended up in positions in different sorts of careers, just to show you how this could actually work from touchdown in UChicagoGRAD through attainment of a job. So I thought I'd start with a case study of Dr. Harrington, who's a PhD in political science in 2015. She actually spoke at our graduate orientation a few years ago. So UChicagoGRAD runs our all-campus graduate orientation that brings usually over 1,000 students into Rockefeller Chapel to introduce them to the university. She won a prize for teaching. She participated in fellowship advising at UChicagoGRAD, and she used us for to review her job documents, Skype practice. She did a practice job talk, and she's now a postdoctoral scholar at Wake Forest University. Another example is Juliana Schroder, who is a PhD, a joint PhD in Booth in psychology, and she actually does research that's very interesting to individuals who are thinking about going on the job market who are. One of the things she does is she studies whether or not people's perception of a candidate changes based on how they get information about that candidate. Is it through written material, sending an email or a resume, or actually talking to someone? Now, I, for one, until I read Juliana's research, thought for sure writing an email, taking the time, having everything written down in perfect form would lend someone to have a better impression of me. But what Juliana's research clearly shows is that speaking one-on-one with someone is a better way for them to understand what you're interested in, and actually people tend to have better and higher views of your capability and intelligence when they talk to you rather than through written materials. She worked with our office on mastering the elevator speech, those 30-second to 1 second to 1 minute blurbs that you need to get to talk about yourself. She attended our academic job talks. She's now a tenure-track assistant professor at Berkeley. So here are a couple of examples inside the academy. I thought I'd tell you about some individuals who've gone outside the academy. Luke Gardner, who you see actually participating in our Expose Yourself series at the Art Institute. He's giving a talk on humor in religious art. And you can see there's lots of people around. Probably very few of them are in classics. So he had to talk about religious art and humor to physicists, to other individuals. He was practicing these broad skills for talking to people about the work that he does. He came here as a postdoc, as a Donnelly Fellow, but he decided to explore different careers. He attended events and completed interview prep at UChicagoGRAD, and now he's at McKinsey. So the idea here is that UChicagoGRAD, along with what's happening in the divisions and schools, provides students with the opportunities to learn about many different options out there and then supports them as they go through the process. One other example is Rebecca Tarney, who is a postdoc in biochemistry. She has a BA from UChicago, a PhD in chemistry from Penn State. She completed job market reviews at UChicagoGRAD. She was selected for an interview at Abbott Labs through our grad fair, and she actually began as a senior scientist at Abbott Labs, is beginning very soon. And finally, I thought I'd give you one more example of Lauren Qatheen, who's an MA in Middle Eastern Studies, and she went to talks. She helped even organize some on career skills for master's and PhD students working on the Middle East. She went to career advising at UChicagoGRAD, and she is an editor for a risk management firm in Dubai. So there's lots of examples for how students can get the experiences that they need to work through their academic career and into leadership positions all over. And one of the ways that we've actually done this is not just through one-on-one interviewing, but this past fall we actually had our first career fair, where we introduced students and postdocs, masters, PhDs, and postdocs on campus to employers who are interested in recruiting specifically graduate and professional students. So the way that we did this was we had a one-day career fair in the fall. We actually had 60 companies come to campus from a wide range of fields, and we had 500 students and postdocs interviewed for that one day. Several students and postdocs submitted resumes ahead of time. We had a resume book, we had one-on-one interviewing on the spot, and this is something that we will continue annually that really is designed to help support students and postdocs think about a variety of careers. So I think I'll end there. I'm happy to take questions. I did want to mention that we really think of UChicagoGRAD as a leader across our Ivy Plus peers in terms of thinking about where our graduate students and postdocs end up. And we're excited to really forge this new dialogue about the value of postgraduate education and hopefully not only do it here on campus, but be a leader for how we think about the value of advanced degrees nationally and beyond. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Beilock. That was a really great presentation, and I know that I will definitely take away some of those tips for public speaking myself. Just as a reminder to our attendees on the line, if you do have questions for Dr. Beilock, please do use the questions box and go ahead and submit those to staff. We have had a few come in, so I'd love to get your thoughts on a couple of these questions at this point. So the first one I'd like to ask, we have a question from someone who's currently a postdoc in biology, and this individual is asking, how can I word or discuss my experiences as a postdoc in a way that matches with what companies who do consulting or business are looking for on my resume?
Well, this is a great question. One thing I think is that you can talk about your research accomplishments in really a tangible way and talk about how you're qualified to think about complex ideas and come up with solutions. You can talk about how you can think of the lab almost as a business, right? How you can manage teams of students, tasks, budget, inventories, new skills, and get to a desired outcome. All of these things are qualities that employers look for, and being able to do that in a biology laboratory likely translates into the types of companies that you're interested in working with.
That's great. Similarly, we had a question come in about careers in research and development. So this individual is asking where or how can they get advice on industrial careers in research and development?
Well, UChicagoGRAD is a great way to be connected. So this person could come and talk to a UChicagoGRAD career advisor, and not only would they connect them with particular opportunities that we know about, but they would also connect them with alumni who've gone into similar situations. I should mention that UChicagoGRAD now has a job site specifically for masters, PhDs, and postdocs, and you can find that by going through grad.uchicago.edu. And not only do our jobs posted for advanced students there, but we can help you through our staff in terms of making the connections and getting the experiences that you need to pursue the career you're interested
in. Great, thank you. So we just had a question come in live on the line asking if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about the English Language Institute, and if someone is interested in that institute or getting advice from them, how it's possible for them to do that.
So again, if you go to grad.uchicago.edu, there's a link to the English Language Institute. So this is a reformatted program over the last couple of years. It was formerly in the International House, and it now is a collaboration with the Division of Humanities, which is the academic discipline that focuses on language. The English Language Institute is interested in helping students with English as a second language, but also thinking about aspects of culture and interaction that students coming from outside the U.S. might be interested in participating in. So I know there were summer boot camps last summer that got new students who are coming from outside the U.S. ready for the academic year, and one of the things they did as part of those language boot camps was spend time going on field trips around Chicago, not only to learn Chicago, but learn some of the United States customs, idiosyncrasies, if you will, that would allow students to better communicate with their fellow students, their advisors, employers. There's also work that helps students understand and get used to teaching in an American system. There are programs run through UChicagoGRAD and the Chicago Center for Teaching, and there's also programs that allow students who are coming from foreign institutions or different backgrounds to get experience and think about strategically how to speak up and talk in seminar classes. So we offer lots of different programs designed to support students who might not have had the experiences that easily afford them insight into how to behave in the U.S. educational system.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you. Another question that we had come in that relates, I think, probably a little bit to your research is, when you're transitioning into a new career or into industry from academia, is there an optimal way to override your brain into hijacking any confidence that you might have with a fear of kind of the unknown or the unfamiliar?
Yeah, the what-ifs are very powerful, right? What if this doesn't work? What if I look like an idiot? Sometimes it's talked about as imposter syndrome, where people think that they've tricked everyone else into thinking that they're smart enough to be where they are. This is something that a lot of people experience, though most people don't like to admit it. And if you tricked everyone into thinking you're smart enough, they must not be that smart. That's the first thing. But it's also the case that sometimes it's just really taking a first step, right? It's oftentimes we think about the hardest thing to do is make that mini step that will allow us to go into a new place or have confidence in ourselves. So one thing I think about, if you're transitioning to a new career, you have this sort of imposter syndrome, you're doing a lot of the what ifs, what can you think back on concretely where you've succeeded? Maybe you don't know everything that's happening in this new field, but you know you have impeccable logic skills. You know one part of it better than anyone else. I find that actually thinking about concrete ways that you've succeeded, even writing them down, can be a great way to help build a little more confidence, and then it's a snowball effect. You do a little bit better, you're not as worried, a little bit better, and so on. But thinking back to those specific instances where you've succeeded, even when you might have been worried about it, is a great way to build up your confidence so that you're in the right place and in the right frame of mind when you're in that sort of harried situation.
That's great advice, and probably some more advice that I'll be taking. We also had a question come in on the line here. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the partnerships that UChicagoGRAD has been able to form with different units and divisions on campus. This alumna is curious about whether all departments across the university are on board with the concept of an alternative to academic careers. She writes in that she has a sense that her former department did not support that as much when she was here on campus.
So I think it's a really great question, and I think we're in the midst of a cultural shift. What faculty I think do realize is that not all of their students are going into academia. We have the data to suggest that's the case, and I know as a faculty member, when my students have told me that they're interested in going outside of academia, all I've been able to say to them is good luck, and if you get really rich, you should come fund my research. But other than that, I haven't had the tools or support to help them. And so one thing that I think UChicagoGRAD is doing is providing a viable alternative and a place for faculty to help support their students. And of course, we as faculty members definitely want some of our students to go on into academia to further the work we're doing. But I think as we start and continue to talk about this idea that going into the marketplace is a form of knowledge transition, it's a form of important impact, faculty are getting more comfortable with these ideas. Students are feeling better about talking to their faculty about these ideas. And it's somewhat of a slow process, but I think we're making headway. I will say that we have instances of where this has happened very explicitly in some of the divisions in schools. So UChicagoGRAD partners with the Biological Sciences Division on an NIH grant that the Biological Sciences received. It's a 5-year, almost $2 million grant called My Choice, designed to explore alternative careers for health science students, and there's faculty PIs on it. The faculty have been very supportive of this, and the students feel now that it's opened up a dialogue, I think, to talk to their faculty. We also partner with other initiatives on campus. Department's History runs a Mellon-funded program focused on what one could do with their PhD. And I think, this is a cultural shift that will happen, but it takes some time, and it takes, a constant sort of messaging about the importance of the skills that students are getting outside their traditional discipline that will help them in the academic marketplace. It will also help them in industry, government, and nonprofit.
Great, thank you. So one of the other questions that we've had come in is asking about LinkedIn as a useful tool for students or alumni who have graduate degrees and are looking to transition into industry. In your opinion, to what extent is LinkedIn a useful tool for those folks?
I would say yes. LinkedIn is probably one of the most essential tools in almost every sector of the labor market. It's not only useful for connecting with other alumni, but also increasingly for receiving tailored job listings and applying online. I would say don't be bashful about connecting with strangers who look interesting on LinkedIn, but remember you should always, always customize the invitation message so that individuals know why you're reaching out. Instead of asking also for a reference or an in, you could ask alums or individuals on LinkedIn for a conversation to talk about their career trajectories or paths after UChicago. It's a better way of getting things going. They don't think you're asking for something from them, and it's a way to foster a relationship. And for alumni who graduated within the last 5 years or so, we're happy to, at UChicagoGRAD, to provide expert guidance for crafting an effective profile. And UChicagoGRAD past presentations are on LinkedIn are available online.
That's great, and sort of transitions into one of the live questions that we received on the line here from an alumna who is about 25 years actually outside of her graduate degree. She's wondering what aspects of UChicagoGRAD would be best able to work with someone like her as she is beginning to transition from consulting into a nonprofit career.
Yeah, I will say that all of the materials that we use are available online, and I think there's opportunities for the alumni to engage in our programs and throughout their trajectory of being there.
Great, thank you. We did have another live question come in here that I think is really interesting. What would you say to someone asking how to communicate that she's a team player, but without kind of blurring your own contribution or looking as though you're taking all the credit for your students who work in your lab or something like that? What would you suggest to them if they want to take ownership for their own work, but not overextend what they're taking credit for?
That's a really interesting question. There was just some research that came out that said, showing that women often get discounted in these team settings, and their contribution is implicitly we judge it to be less valuable than others in team settings. So it's really important, both as a woman, but also just as an individual in general, when you're thinking about working with a team and conveying those accomplishments. So I think there's different ways to do this, but conveying that you actually successfully worked with the team towards an outcome is a positive thing, right? Teams get things done in most sectors, whether it's in the academy or outside. Rarely anymore do we have the single researcher toiling away by themselves in an industry, and this is true in the workplace as well. People work together in a group. So I think you could talk about how you successfully worked with a team to achieve a particular goal, and as a member of that team, here are the particular aspects of what you did that you played lead on and saw and through to the end.
Great, thank you. So one of the other questions we had come in here is actually an interesting flip on a lot of what we've been talking about. This person is interested in your thoughts on transitioning maybe back into academia after a career in industry. Do you have thoughts on that, or kind of the best way to leverage your industry experience that way?
Yeah, well, I think in general, it's typically easier to transition from academia into industry than vice versa. But I think if this person is interested in that, making sure that it would depend a lot on their particular field, but that their research and publications are ongoing and up to date, and if they haven't been in that sort of sector for a while, actually reaching out and collaborating with someone who is doing work similar to them to get their feet wet again might be a good way to start the process. Of course, if it's about teaching a particular class or contributing with students in a specific way, then there's lots of opportunities, I think, at the University of Chicago and other places to explore whether that's possible.
Great, thank you. And then we had two questions come in about job searching in areas other than your own, whether that's geographic or outside of your particular industry. What would you say to a question like, how can I best position myself to have future opportunities in a different city or region?
I think if you're going to a specific city or region, thinking about scheduling a trip and actually getting yourself there, so taking some of our research from one of our alumna about being face-to-face, even on phone or on Skype, would be really great. Also reaching out to alumni who might be in those areas, who have particular interests that are similar to you, could be a good way to make connections. And finally, UChicagoGRAD can help identify opportunities in particular regions that you're not in right now.
Great, thank you. And then one last question that we have here, relating back to your research. This individual is asking, how can your research help someone in a mediation context if they're looking for tips so that they can function their best during points of conflict as well as points of pressure?
Yeah, I think conflict's great because when we're in conflict situations, a lot of the same sort of stress reactions pop up, and we're often quick to make decisions that are not necessarily in anyone's best interest, let alone ourselves. And so in my book, Choke, I talk a lot about ways in which you can help mitigate high conflict situations, whether it's taking a step back, even just a 5-minute break does a lot to change how people approach situations. In psychology, we talk about it as the incubation effect. It's kind of like when your computer freezes and you have to do a hard reboot. Taking that step back allows you to lose all those wrong ends, and you can come back to a situation seeing things in a new way. So even those thinking strategically about taking a 5-minute break at a really conflicted time can be a great way to move the situation forward, and there's research supporting that. I talk about a lot of other techniques in Choke for ensuring that everyone's performing at their best when it matters.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a lot of the questions that have come in so far, so I really want to thank you again for taking the time to do this presentation today. I'm happy to throw it over to you for any final thoughts that you might have. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
No, it was great. Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Well, thank you again to Dr. Beilock for today's presentation. As a reminder to our attendees on the line, please do watch your email for a link to a recording of today's presentation, along with a follow-up survey. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon, and we hope to see you again at our next